I asked you guys who would you like to see me do retrospective on next. The options were Javelin, Savant, Skyrocket, and Weasel. And Javelin won to my surprise. It not just won, but won by over 50% of the votes. I had expected Savant to win, but I was wrong. Javelin debuted in Green Lantern issue 173, with his story continuing in 174. He's a former Olympian athlete, and that's all we know about him. We don't even know his name. He was hired to steal an engine from Faris Aircrafts, where he would of course have a run on Green Lantern, which is when he learns his weakness, yellow. So he makes all of his weapons and everything yellow. Another fun fact is that this story comes from 1984, the Bronze Age, as in the end of the Bronze Age. It's literally 1 year from being the Dark Age. If this was a Silver Age story, I wouldn't be that surprised by this. But for a Bronze Age story, this is a little out there. Now, Hal Jordan would of course manage to defeat him because at the end of the day, he is just a guy with a stick. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, his backstory wouldn't have seemed to have changed. I say that because they don't really mention anything. He would resurface to fight the power company, where he would get his butt kicked by Skyrocket. We don't actually see this, but it was mentioned to have happened after fighting Hal Jordan. And after, he'd be drafted into Suicide Squad, and on his very first mission going to face Circe, he'd be impaled with his own javelin. That is cold, but I like his Circe. He would then return with no explanation other than he survived being killed, because it wasn't an open-ended death where maybe he could have survived. No, he literally died. We saw him die. Anyways, he's back and now working for Dr. Cyber, only for Skyrocket again to kick his butt and stop him. Then he would return in the Checkmate comics in the early 2000s, now being hired to kill Amanda Waller. But he'd fail, only for him to get run over by a jeep, driven by a soldier that would later be killed by Rick Flag. And again, he was once brought back to life with no explanation and cry for justice, where he picks a fight with Supergirl. Yet again, a guy with a spear, so he just gets knocked out by her. And that's it. He wouldn't return after Flashpoint or in Rebirth. He would appear in cameo form in the JLU TV show in the background on a handful of occasions, where he was a part of the Legion of Doom. He never got a speaking role or even a, clear role that it was him. In fact, we don't even know if it really is him. It just looks like him. But there are plenty of characters who, in my opinion, probably could fit the bill of whoever the hell this guy is. However, I'm mentioning it because a lot of places refer to this character being Javelin. He also appeared in Batman the Brave and the Bold, where Javelin was seen fighting Green Lantern. Once again, more of a cameo, but he did do more than the JLU version of him. With the character being in full focus, we can tell this is actually intended to be Javelin. This show is known for bringing in a lot of different characters from just different comic books, scattered across DC history. In fact, it's actually the TV show with the most adaptations of characters in all of history. And no, not just comic book history, just history in general. So it's not that big of a surprise that Javelin did appear. He would debut in live action in the 7th season of Arrow, this time with an actual name, that being Malcolm Byron, who is a chemical arms dealer that would be arrested by Argus. This version of the character is very different than his comic counterpart. However, I believe this is meant to be more of a reference to the comics rather than an actual adaptation. And his most iconic role being the Suicide Squad, another live-action version of Javelin. This time around, he'd be on the Suicide Squad beach team, with him being one of the many to be killed. But before that happened, he seemingly had a flirty vibe with Harley Quinn. But along with the entire beach team, with the exceptions of Rick Flag, Harley Quinn, Weasel, and TDK, he would be killed. And I appreciate the fact that they went all out for his costume, because he really does look like the character from the comics. And he dies like the character from the comics. Too soon? I mean that he dies on the Suicide Squad. The way he dies is pretty different. I mean the first time, not the second time. Although seeing his comic book history, maybe this isn't the end for Javelin in the DCEU, or DCU. He'll just return whenever, without any explanation of how that happened. Javelin, in my opinion, is a character that is very much a throwaway character. He's usually only there to die and to raise the stakes. Personally, I think he can work, but not against Green Lantern. Maybe against Green Arrow, or even a character like Katana, who doesn't really have a rogues gallery. But when you put him against Green Lantern, it makes him come across extremely silly. Which, yes, he did become a character who was mocked for being quote-unquote silly, but I don't think he has to be a silly character. He could be taken seriously if he was given an opponent that was actually in a pretty equal match. Because when it goes against Green Lantern, there's not really a stake being risked. Because it's a guy with a godly ring going against a guy with a stick. Also, I think his whole backstory needs to be built on because we know literally nothing about him. Except that the fact that he was once an Olympic athlete. Which in itself could be an interesting plot to develop. But only time will tell. We probably will never see him again, I think. Because we are 2 reboots since the character has appeared last. And he's nowhere to be found. Anyways, that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.